important is it going to be for Indian companies at this point in time to bring in global partners or to bring in global capital to be able to fuel the kind of growth that you expect? Is this also a time where we will see more Indian companies scouting for global opportunities, both from an innovation perspective and a technology perspective, not so much from a market perspective?
Both are important, Shireen. And I do want to specify that while we look at global partners, it's not only about taking their technology now, because as I go back to your point on R&D, and we've got Mahindra Research Valley and Chennai, that really has been the hub for us to deliver the cars that we've delivered so far, which are at a very high quality. So R&D in India is at a much higher level today. That said, as we look at the global market, partnerships do help us take it forward. And similarly for capital, we see a lot of sources within India for capital. There will be global capital that comes in. Often that will help us, again, win in global markets. So both points are essential, but I would look at it as not a necessary condition. It's something that will just help us do better.
What's the export target over the next 5 years, Anish Shah, before I bring Alok into the conversation?
That's a difficult question for us because we have such huge demand in India that we are trying to fix right now or trying to meet at this point in time. And our export markets are clamoring for more. So at this stage, our first focus is double capacity, bring our wait times for our vehicles in India to a much lower level, and then look at a set of markets globally where we can take a significant market share. And then beyond that, as space to go into another set of markets. So we've got a fairly aggressive plan for global growth. Don't have numbers right now because we're more looking at serving our capacity in India before we go more aggressive globally.
Okay. Alok, as I pointed out, what matters most at this point in time is the execution roadmap as well as the financing roadmap. These are large, audacious goals that FCCI and Mckinsey have put together in terms of the action agenda to 2047. Now, just give me a sense of the kind of capital, both domestic and foreign, that will be required to be able to get us to these goals that have been identified in this report. And more importantly, where do you see the key vulnerabilities? What are the downside risks to some of these projections?
No, thank you, Shireen. I think firstly on execution, this has been done with 200 companies involved. And so this is not an academic perspective. This is actually what companies want to do and want to drive on the ground. A lot of this is also focused on leveraging India's digital infrastructure. So if I look at, and I'll come to the financing question in a minute, but the reality of the opportunities of the India stack, particularly as you now have logistics, digital health, and ONDC, is now going to create huge new opportunities for companies to execute further and faster than ever before. So I think the first and foremost is at every stage, you'll see this in our action plan, is focused very much on what is it that the private sector can do and what can be done in the different states and centers together. The second point on financing, I think there are two sources we need to reflect on. One is, of course, equity capital, both domestically, as you have more and more companies growing, and we expect to see another 1,000 companies grow to be beyond $500 million in revenue over the next 7 years. And that's going to be a huge capital markets and IPO opportunity that is a way to raise domestic capital. And the second is we expect to see a significant foreign equity capital coming into India. You've already seen this, of course, in the last 2 years with respect to both FDI and FII. And actually, if you look at the manufacturing supply chains that we just talked about, also agri and food processing, electronics, and several other sectors, we actually see a significant appetite from McKinsey's own clients in the investor space and the sovereign wealth space, focusing on India. On financing, the biggest issue is actually credit, particularly for MSMEs. And again, this is talked about a long time, but now we're seeing change happen. And why is that execution happening? Because you're finally moving to more cash flow-based lending for MSMEs, because you now have the data that's coming off your transport portals, your logistics portal, your actual GST information that you can now underwrite. For example, on companies participating in the government digital marketplaces or on the ONDC. So if I look at the single biggest source of capital to drive growth, will be to shift the credit penetration to MSMEs, which is still around only 40%, to about 80% over the next 7 or 8 years. We are already seeing the leading private sector institutions jump ahead with respect to loans to transporters, to logistics companies, to warehouses, farmers in export value chains, for example, in shrimp, fruit and vegetables. So the biggest single shift will be in the credit availability to MSMEs using the data for cash flow lending. And that will have a multiplier impact on larger companies and the ability to attract equity financing.
Well, that's an important point. And as you rightly mentioned, the gap there persists when we talk about access to credit for MSMEs, and that needs to be something that continues to be worked on. But Sanjiv Mehta, you started the program by giving me a very specific indication of the priority areas that you hope to focus on by way of the innovation clusters, not just from an industry point of view, but also from an HUL point of view, Sanjiv, on the back of the 10 priority areas identified in the 50 actions that have been put down as well. What specifically can we expect? And an area of interest for me and a passion for me specifically is unlocking the potential of the women in this country and enhancing the role that women play in India's economy. So specifically from that lens as well, what more can we expect?
Superb. Let me start by telling you, Shireen, that last week we have about 750 scientists and technologists in R&D centers, 3 R&D centers in India. And last week we touched gender parity in R&D. Now, gender parity in R&D, when the national quotient is about 16%, is something which we are very proud about. Yeah, and one of the things which we need to do is encourage women's participation in STEM. And this gives me huge hope and optimism. So this is on one side. If I look at it at HUL in general, yeah, we are about 44, 45% gender quotient. And in another 2 years, we'll become gender balanced. Yeah. Then when you look at it from a lens of what we've been doing on Shakti, we have now got about 200,000 Shakti Ammas who generate a turnover of nearly $500 million. Yeah, again, even in deep remote areas, people want to work, people want to earn their livelihood and lead a life of dignity. So today we are reaching a stage where the women of India are craving for opportunities, and there are several examples today of where we are seeing this being made, the opportunities being made for them. Now, this will need to be accelerated. Yeah, today, women's participation in labor is about 20%. We are looking at least doubling it. And that would be also bringing in equity. But that would make a tremendous difference to the GDP of the country. So clearly, as far as women's participation is concerned, I'm a big believer in it. And I believe that as a nation, we need to make definitely big strides in making a difference.
Alok, I'm going to give you the final say as we wrap this up. Can we expect an periodic outcome report? Alok, that would be interesting, right? To see how much progress has been made, where the gaps are.
So Shireen, let me make a commitment to you, which is this is not a report. This is an initiative that we will continue for multiple years with FICCI. We will have a report out every year, and that's why Subhrakant, as the next president, and Anish as the successor to him, have all been part of this team together. And from a McKinsey perspective, we look at this as a roadmap for execution. We're committed to creating jobs and growth. That's why we call it sustainable and inclusive growth. And frankly, I'm very excited about it because not only the 200 companies, there are thousands of people who've been involved, both academic institutions, investors globally. And so we're very excited about this opportunity for India. So we're very focused on 600 million jobs, 6 times the per capita income, activating the sectors, partnering with the states, and creating thousands of successful companies in the scale-up India mindset. So we're absolutely committed to outcomes here, Shireen, and we're excited about the partnership with FCCI over multiple years to make that happen.
All right, Alok, Sanjiv Mehta, Subhrakant Panda, Anish Shah, appreciate you joining us here to take us through the execution roadmap that's been charted out by FCCI and McKinsey to ensure that India achieves its audacious goals, some outlined here, including a 6-fold increase in per capita. But we look forward to continuing to review the work that's being done and how the private sector is going to take the lead on ensuring that these goals are realized. Always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us. That's it then on this edition of CEO Sentimeter. From all of us here on the team, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.